Marcus Williams dropped to his knees and started digging with his bare hands. The voice was faint, barely a whisper through the dirt, but he heard it. A woman, buried alive, right beneath his feet. His 12-year-old son stood frozen behind him. "Dad, what's down there?" Marcus didn't answer. He just kept digging, faster, harder. His fingers hit plywood. Someone had built a coffin. When he finally pulled her out, beaten, bloody, gasping for air, she grabbed his jacket and whispered something that would destroy everything he thought he knew about justice. "Please, don't call the police. They'll kill me." She was Victoria Sterling, the missing billionaire, and she was begging a stranger to save her life. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. Don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The mist came early that September morning. Marcus Williams had seen 1,000 mornings like this one. 8 years as a ranger in Blackwood State Forest. 4 years before that as a combat medic in Afghanistan. He knew these woods better than he knew his own reflection. But this morning was different. This morning, his son was with him. "Dad, why do we have to be up so early?" Jalen shuffled along the narrow trail, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of an oversized jacket. At 12, the boy was all knees and elbows, growing faster than Marcus could afford to keep him in clothes that fit. His dark skin was ashy from the cold, and there were still pillow creases on his cheek. "Because the best time to see the forest is when it's waking up," Marcus said, adjusting the pack on his shoulders. "And because you've got 1 more week before school starts. I'll be damned if you spend it playing video games in your room." Jalen made a face but didn't argue. That was one of the things Marcus appreciated about his son. The kid might grumble, but he showed up. He always showed up. 3 years since Denise died. 3 years since cancer had eaten her alive while Marcus watched, helpless, holding her hand as she slipped away, piece by piece. 3 years of just the two of them, learning to be enough for each other. "See that?" Marcus crouched beside a patch of disturbed earth. His practiced eye cataloged the details instantly. "Boot prints. Recent. Maybe a day old. Size 11 or 12. Deep treads." Jalen knelt beside him. "Is that bad?" "Not necessarily. Could be hikers who got lost. Could be hunters scouting for deer season." Marcus frowned, studying the prints more closely. They led deeper into the forest, away from the marked paths, into an area that was technically restricted. "But they shouldn't be out here. This is protected land." "Should we follow them?" Marcus hesitated. He could radio it in, let someone else handle it. That would be the smart thing to do. But that wasn't his nature. Never had been. "Stay close," he said, "and stay quiet." They followed the prints for nearly half a mile. The trail wound through old-growth trees, past a stream where deer had come to drink, into an area Marcus rarely patrolled because there was never any reason to. The prints led to a small clearing, ringed by massive oaks. Marcus stopped. Something wasn't right. The ground here was different, recently disturbed. Leaves pushed aside. Dirt that looked too loose, too fresh. "Dad?" Jalen's voice was small, uncertain. "Do you hear that?" Marcus went still. At first, nothing. Just the morning sounds of the forest. Birds calling, branches creaking, the distant chatter of a squirrel. Then he heard it. Faint. So faint he almost missed it. A sound that didn't belong. A voice. Muffled. Desperate. "Help!" The word was barely audible, more breath than sound, but it shot through Marcus like electricity. He was moving before he could think. "Hello?" He dropped to his knees at the edge of the disturbed earth, pressing his ear to the ground. "Can you hear me?" The response was immediate. A surge of frantic sounds from beneath the soil. Gasping. Crying. Words he couldn't make out but didn't need to. Someone was buried down there. Someone was alive. "Jalen, my pack, now!" Marcus started digging with his hands, scooping away loose dirt and leaves. His fingers hit something solid just inches down. Plywood. Someone had built a box. "Dad, what?" "Call 911. Tell them we need an ambulance at the Old Oak Clearing, North Sector, 2 miles in from the ranger station." Marcus's voice was steady, commanding, the voice of a combat medic who'd kept men alive under fire. "Go!" Jalen fumbled for the satellite phone. Cell service was worthless out here. But even as his son made the call, Marcus was calculating. 2 miles. Rough terrain. Even if they sent a team immediately, it would be 20 minutes, maybe 30. He looked at the makeshift grave, heard the weakening sounds from below. Whoever was down there didn't have 30 minutes. He grabbed his camping axe from the pack and started chopping at the plywood. Each blow measured and precise. Too much force, and he could hit whoever was underneath. Not enough, and they'd suffocate while he worked. The wood was cheap, thin, meant to keep someone contained rather than protected. It splintered under the axe. Marcus tore the pieces away with his hands, ignoring the splinters that dug into his palms. Dirt poured through the opening. The box was filling. Whoever was inside was being slowly suffocated by the very earth meant to hide them. "I'm coming!" Marcus shouted. "Hold on!" He plunged his hand into the dirt, feeling blindly, desperately. His fingers brushed something warm, skin, a hand. He grabbed it, felt fingers clutch at his with terrifying strength, and he pulled. She came up like a drowning victim breaking the surface, gasping, choking, dirt streaming from her hair and clothes. Marcus caught her under the arms and hauled her out of the makeshift grave. He cradled her against his chest as she coughed and retched, expelling dirt and spit and sheer terror. "I've got you," he said. The same words he'd said to wounded soldiers in Afghanistan, to lost hikers, to his son when Denise died. "I've got you. You're safe now." She was small in his arms, couldn't have weighed more than 120 pounds. Her clothes had once been expensive, designer probably, but now they were ruined with dirt and blood. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. There were ligature marks on her wrists where zip ties had cut into the skin. And when she opened her eyes, one blue, one too swollen to see, she looked at him with an expression of such raw, desperate hope that it nearly broke his heart. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was raw and cracking. "Please don't call anyone yet." Marcus stared at her. "Ma'am, you need a hospital. They'll find me." Her hand shot out, grabbing his jacket with surprising strength. "If you call the police, they'll find me. Please, please, I'm begging you." She was in shock. Had to be. Trauma did strange things to people's minds, made them paranoid, made them say things that didn't make sense. But there was something in her eyes, something beyond the fear and pain, a clarity, an intelligence that cut through the terror. Jalen appeared at his elbow, the satellite phone in his hand. "They're sending someone. But Dad, who is that?" "I don't know yet." Marcus looked down at the woman, at the grave they'd pulled her from, at the plywood and the fresh boot prints leading away through the trees. Someone had done this. Someone had beaten her, tied her up, buried her alive, and walked away. But we're going to find out. "No hospitals," she said again. Her grip on his jacket tightened. "No police. Not yet. Please. I need time to think." "Jalen," Marcus kept his voice calm. Call them back. Tell them, false alarm. We found what made the noise. Spooked deer or something. Apologize for wasting their time. Dad? Do it. Jalen's eyes went wide, but he made the call. Marcus stood, lifting the woman with him. She weighed almost nothing. We're taking her to the cabin. But now, son. The walk back was the longest 2 miles of Marcus's life. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling things he couldn't quite catch. Jalen walked ahead, looking back every few minutes with questions written all over his face. Questions Marcus didn't have answers to. The cabin wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, running water from a well, solar panels on the roof. 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. Right now, that isolation felt like both a blessing and a curse. Marcus laid her on the couch. She was shivering despite the warmth of the morning, her body going into shock. His medical kit was in the closet, well stocked, organized with the efficiency of a man who'd once been responsible for keeping soldiers alive in the desert. Jalen, warm water, clean towels, the first aid kit from my room. Move. His son obeyed without question. Marcus started his assessment the way he'd been trained. ABCS. Airway, breathing, circulation. She was breathing, albeit shallowly. Her pulse was rapid but strong. No obvious signs of internal bleeding. But the bruising on her face and arms suggested she'd been beaten thoroughly. The ligature marks on her wrists were infected, probably a day or 2 old. There were cuts on her hands, defensive wounds, and what looked like a bullet graze on her left shoulder. Someone had tried very hard to kill this woman. "Who are you?" he asked softly, cleaning the dirt from her face with a warm cloth. "What happened to you?" Her eyes fluttered open. "My name," she whispered, "is Victoria Sterling." Marcus's hands froze. Victoria Sterling. The name detonated in his mind like a flashbang grenade. He'd seen her face on the news, on the front page of every newspaper, on missing person posters in town. Victoria Sterling, tech billionaire, founder of Sterling Technologies, one of the most successful software companies in the world. She disappeared 2 weeks ago, vanished from her San Francisco penthouse without a trace. The FBI was involved. There was a $5 million reward for information leading to her recovery. And she was lying on his couch, covered in dirt and blood, begging him not to call the police. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Not quite." A ghost of a smile crossed her battered face. "Though I suppose I'm supposed to be dead. So maybe close enough." Jalen appeared with the supplies. His eyes went wide as he got his first clear look at their guest. "Dad, is that—" "Jalen, I need you to do something for me." Marcus kept his voice calm. "I need you to go to your room. Put on your headphones. Play that game you like, the loud one. Don't come out until I tell you to. But please, son, trust me." Jalen looked between his father and the woman. Marcus saw the moment his son made the connection, saw recognition flash across his face. But Jalen was a good kid. He nodded and disappeared down the hall. Marcus turned back to Victoria Sterling. "You want to tell me why one of the richest women in America is buried in my forest?" "Because someone very powerful wants me dead," she said. "And they almost succeeded." Over the next hour, as Marcus cleaned her wounds and bandaged her injuries, Victoria told him everything. She'd built Sterling Technologies from nothing, a scholarship kid from Detroit who taught herself to code, who saw a gap in cybersecurity and filled it with software that now protected half the Fortune 500. She'd made billions. She'd changed the world. And she'd made enemies. "My business partner," she said, "Daniel Crawford. We started the company together 15 years ago, 50-50 split. But over the years, we grew apart. He wanted to take the company in directions I couldn't support. Like what? Selling user data, working with foreign governments, cutting corners on security. She winced as Marcus cleaned the bullet graze on her shoulder. We fought about it constantly. So he killed you? Tried to. She laughed bitterly. 3 nights ago, he invited me to his estate to discuss a new product launch. I should have known better. When I arrived, there were 2 men waiting. Not security. Contractors. The kind you hire when you want someone to disappear. Marcus's jaw tightened. They beat you. They did more than that. They wanted access codes, passwords, details about our security protocols. They wanted me to sign over my shares of the company. Her hand touched her swollen eye. And when I wouldn't, they got creative. How did you end up buried in Blackwood Forest? That was Daniel's masterstroke. Victoria's voice went cold. If I just disappeared, the FBI would never stop looking. But if they found evidence that I'd gone hiking, gotten lost, had an accident, people die in the wilderness all the time, don't they, Ranger? Marcus nodded slowly, understanding. They drove me out here in the trunk of a car. I was barely conscious. I remember them digging. Remember the sound of the dirt hitting the plywood? She paused. And I remember Daniel's voice right before they sealed me in. What did he say? Her voice broke. He said, "Nothing personal, Vic. Just business." Marcus reached out and took her hand, the same gesture he'd offered to countless wounded soldiers, to his wife as she lay dying in a hospital bed, to his son when the nightmares came. You're safe now. No, Victoria shook her head. You don't understand. Daniel has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. Half the town council owns stock in Sterling Technologies. If word gets out that I'm alive, that I'm here, he'll send people to finish the job. Then what do you want me to do? I can't just keep you hidden here forever. I don't need forever. I just need time to think, to plan, to figure out who I can trust. She looked up at him. Can you give me that? A day? Maybe 2? Marcus should have said no. Should have called the FBI. Handed her over to people who actually knew how to handle billion-dollar conspiracies and attempted murders. But he looked at this woman. At the ligature marks on her wrists. At the bruises blooming purple and yellow on her skin. And he thought about Denise. About how she'd looked at him in those final days, asking him to save her when he couldn't. Begging him to do something, anything, to make the cancer stop eating her alive. He hadn't been able to save his wife. But maybe he could save Victoria Sterling. 48 hours, he said. Then we do this my way, with people I trust. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Marcus stood, gathering the bloody towels and used bandages. You need rest, food, and probably a dozen other things I can't give you. My medical training only goes so far. I've had worse, she said. Marcus very much doubted that. He helped her to his room. Jalen could bunk with him for a few nights, and she was asleep before her head hit the pillow. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, making sure she actually was breathing. That this wasn't all some elaborate hallucination brought on by bad coffee and too many early mornings. But no, she was real. Victoria Sterling was real. And she was sleeping in his bed. And somewhere out there, powerful people who wanted her dead thought they'd succeeded. Marcus closed the door softly. He found Jalen in the kitchen, making sandwiches with the focused intensity of someone trying very hard not to think about the billionaire sleeping 20 feet away. So, Jalen said without looking up, that's Victoria Sterling. Yeah. The one from the news, the missing billionaire. Yeah. And we're not calling the police because... Marcus sat down heavily at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. Because she asked us not to. And because I believe her when she says someone powerful tried to kill her. Jalen finally looked up, his young face serious. Are we in danger? It was the question Marcus had been asking himself since they pulled Victoria from the ground. The honest answer was yes. Probably. Almost certainly. But he looked at his son, this brave, smart, good kid who'd already lost so much, and knew he couldn't put that weight on him. I won't let anything happen to you, Marcus said. I promise. Jalen nodded, accepting this, trusting his father the way he'd always trusted him. Okay, so what do? We keep her safe for 2 days. We don't tell anyone she's here. And we figure out how to help her without getting ourselves killed in the process. Sounds easy, Jalen said dryly. Marcus almost smiled. The kid had his mother's sense of humor. I'm glad you found her, Dad, Jalen added quietly. I'm glad she's not dead. Me too, kid. Me too. That night, after Jalen had gone to bed and the cabin was dark and quiet, Marcus sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. Old habit from his army days. From deployments where the night was never truly safe. He told himself he was being paranoid, that no one could possibly know Victoria was here, that they had time. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching him, that somewhere in the darkness, something was waiting. A twig snapped in the tree line. Marcus was on his feet in an instant, rifle raised. Every nerve screaming danger. Just a deer. Spooked by his sudden movement, bounding away into the night. But Marcus didn't lower the rifle. Not yet. Because Victoria Sterling was right. Someone had tried to kill her. And they thought they'd succeeded. But soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, they'd want to confirm their work. They'd come back to make sure the body was still buried, that no one had found her. And when they did, Marcus Williams would be waiting. He'd failed to save Denise, held her hand as the cancer took her piece by piece, powerless to stop it, useless in the face of cellular betrayal. But this was different. This was a threat he could see. An enemy he could fight. The mist rolled in again as midnight approached. Marcus stayed on the porch, watching, waiting, protecting. Inside, Victoria Sterling slept the sleep of the rescued, unaware that her nightmare had only just begun. Dawn broke cold and gray. Marcus hadn't slept. Spent the entire night on that porch with his rifle and his thoughts, watching the tree line for movement that never came. By the time the first light touched the valley below, his eyes burned with exhaustion and his mind churned with questions he couldn't answer. Inside, he found Jalen already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his math homework spread out in front of him, pretending that everything was normal. The kid had always been good at that, finding small islands of routine in the middle of chaos. After Denise died, he'd done the same thing, buried himself in schoolwork and video games. Anything to avoid the gaping hole their lives had become. She awake yet? Jalen asked without looking up from his equations. Haven't checked. Figured she needs the rest. Dad, Jalen's pencil stilled on the paper. What are we actually going to do? Like, really do? Because hiding a missing billionaire in our cabin seems like the kind of thing that could go really wrong really fast. Marcus poured himself coffee from the pot he'd made at 3 a.m. It was thick and bitter now. I'm working on it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. A sound came from Marcus's bedroom. A crash, followed by a muffled cry. Marcus was moving before he could think. crossing the cabin in 3 long strides. The instincts that had kept him alive in combat firing on all cylinders. He threw open the door. Victoria was on the floor beside the bed, tangled in the sheets, her face twisted in pain. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry," she gasped, trying to push herself up with arms that shook with effort. "I just needed to use the bathroom, but my legs—" "Don't apologize." Marcus knelt beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Your body's been through hell. It's going to take time to remember how to work right." He helped her to the bathroom, steadied her when she swayed, gave her privacy but stayed close enough to hear if she fell. When she emerged a few minutes later, her face was clean for the first time, and Marcus could finally see the full extent of the damage. The bruising was worse than he'd thought, spreading across her cheekbone in shades of purple and green. Her lip was split. There were finger-shaped marks on her throat where someone had choked her hard enough to leave impressions. "You should see the other guys," she said, catching him staring. "Did you fight back?" "Like hell." A fierce light sparked in her eyes. "Broke one guy's nose, got the other one in the groin hard enough that he'll be singing soprano for a while. But there were 3 of them, and they had training. Military, maybe. I didn't stand a chance." Marcus helped her back toward the bedroom, but she shook her head. "I can't just lie there anymore. I need to think. To plan." She paused. "Is there coffee?" "Yeah, but it's terrible. I'm a billionaire who just spent 36 hours buried alive. Trust me, I'm not picky." They settled in the living room, Victoria wrapped in one of Denise's old quilts, the one Marcus could never quite bring himself to throw away. She cradled the coffee mug in both hands, savoring the warmth. For a moment, she looked almost normal, almost like any other person seeking refuge from a hard night. Then Jalen walked in. Marcus saw his son's eyes go wide at the full sight of her injuries, at the reality of violence written across her skin. This was what Marcus had wanted to shield him from, the darkness that existed outside their quiet forest life. "Hi," Victoria said softly. "You must be Jalen. Your dad told me you were the one who heard me calling for help." Jalen nodded, suddenly shy. "I thought it was an animal at first, like a fox or something. Lucky for me, you have good ears." She smiled, and despite the split lip and swollen eye, there was warmth in it. Genuine gratitude. "You saved my life. Both of you did." "Why did they do that to you?" Jalen asked. The bluntness of youth cutting through social niceties. "The people who buried you. Why?" Marcus started to intervene, to tell his son that wasn't an appropriate question, but Victoria held up a hand. "It's okay. He deserves to know, considering he's risking his safety to help me." She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. "You know how in video games sometimes you have to fight a boss to get to the next level?" Jalen nodded. "Well, in real life, sometimes the boss doesn't want you to reach that next level. Sometimes they want to keep all the power and all the treasure for themselves, so they try to eliminate the player." She paused. "That's what happened to me. I built something valuable, and someone decided they wanted it more than they wanted me alive." "That's messed up," Jalen said quietly. "Yeah, it really is." Victoria looked down at her coffee. Something flickered across her face. Grief, maybe, or disappointment in a world that had proven itself more brutal than she'd wanted to believe. "The really messed up part is that I trusted him. Daniel was my friend. We built the company together, stayed up nights coding, eating terrible takeout, dreaming about changing the world. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an obstacle." Marcus leaned forward. "You said he has connections. How deep do they go?" "Deep enough that when I disappeared, the investigation got buried under so much red tape, it might as well be in a grave next to where you found me." Victoria's voice went hard. "The FBI agent assigned to my case? His kid goes to a private school that Sterling Technologies endowed with a $10 million grant. The district attorney? Her campaign was funded by Daniel's PAC. The police chief? His pension fund is heavily invested in our stock. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Daniel spent years building a web of influence, and I was too busy actually running the company to notice. So who can you trust? Marcus asked. Honestly, right now, the only people I trust are sitting in this room. She looked between Marcus and Jalen. And I know that's not fair to you. I know I'm asking you to risk everything for a stranger. But I don't have anywhere else to go. And if I surface too early, before I have proof of what Daniel did, I'll be dead before I can tell my story. What kind of proof are you talking about? Victoria's eyes sharpened, the strategic mind that had built a billion-dollar empire clicking into gear. The men who grabbed me, they weren't amateurs. They knew my schedule, my security codes, even my private elevator access. That kind of information doesn't just leak. Someone inside my own company fed it to them. She set down her coffee. If I can find out who, if I can trace the money Daniel paid them, I can build a case that even his connections can't bury. And how exactly do you plan to do that from my cabin in the middle of nowhere? I need access to my company's servers, to the financial records, to the security footage from the night I was taken. It's all there, locked behind firewalls I designed myself. She smiled grimly. Which means I'm one of the few people on Earth who can actually break through them. You need a computer. I need more than that. I need a completely secure connection, hardware that can't be traced, and about 48 hours of uninterrupted time to dig through a decade of financial records. She paused. And maybe some ibuprofen. Everything hurts. Marcus stood and moved to the medicine cabinet. I can help with the ibuprofen. The rest of it, I'm not sure. The internet out here is satellite only, and it's not exactly what you'd call fast or secure. It'll have to do. I can route through enough proxy servers to make tracing me nearly impossible. And I designed most of our security protocols myself. I know the back doors. Victoria accepted the pills he offered, swallowing them dry. The bigger problem is that the moment I start poking around, Daniel's people will know someone's trying to access restricted files. They'll start looking for me. Really looking. Then maybe you shouldn't. I don't have a choice. Victoria's voice cut like steel. Every hour I wait is an hour Daniel spends consolidating power, rewriting history, making my version of events look like the ravings of a mentally unstable woman. Her jaw tightened. He's probably already planting stories about me having a breakdown, about erratic behavior, about maybe running away to escape the pressure of running a major corporation. She paused. I've seen him do it before, to other people who got in his way. He's very good at destroying reputations. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her there had to be another way, a safer way. But he recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in the mirror plenty of times, the look of someone who'd made a decision and would see it through, no matter the cost. Okay, he said finally. We'll set you up with my laptop. It's nothing fancy, but it works. You do what you need to do, and I'll keep watch. I'll help too, Jalen offered quickly. I mean, I don't know anything about hacking or whatever, but I can be a lookout. I'm good at that. Victoria's expression softened. You're a good kid, Jalen. Your dad raised you right. My mom helped, Jalen said quietly. Marcus felt his chest tighten. The kid didn't talk about Denise much, kept most of his grief locked away where he thought it couldn't hurt anyone. But every now and then, she surfaced in little moments like this, reminders that she'd been real, that she'd mattered. I'm sure she did, Victoria said gently, and I'm sure she'd be proud of the person you're becoming. They spent the rest of the morning setting up a makeshift command center at the kitchen table. Marcus's laptop was 5 years old and held together with duct tape in 3 places. But Victoria's fingers flew across the keyboard like she'd been born doing it. She muttered to herself as she worked. Technical jargon that Marcus couldn't follow. Cursing occasionally when she hit a firewall or a security protocol that wouldn't bend to her will. Jalen watched in fascination, abandoning his homework entirely. "How did you learn to do all this?" he asked. "Started when I was about your age, actually. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep us fed, so I spent a lot of time alone. Taught myself to code from library books and online tutorials." She glanced up, a slight smile on her battered face. "Turns out being poor and bored is excellent motivation to learn skills that might make you not poor someday." And it worked. Better than I ever imagined. Better than I probably deserved. She turned back to the screen. "Though right now, I'd trade every dollar I ever made to go back to being broke and safe instead of rich and hunted." "Would you really?" Marcus asked from where he stood by the window, watching the tree line. Victoria paused, considering the question seriously. "No," she admitted. "No, I wouldn't. Because then I wouldn't have built the company, wouldn't have created jobs for thousands of people, wouldn't have developed security software that protects millions of users every day." She looked at Marcus directly. "The money is nice, but it was never the point. The point was making something that mattered." She held his gaze. "I imagine you understand that. You could probably make more money doing something else, but you chose to be a ranger, to protect this forest, to help people who get lost, to teach kids like Jalen how to respect and appreciate the wilderness. That's not about money. That's about purpose." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of kindred spirit. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, it is." They worked through lunch. Victoria refused to stop even when Marcus brought her a sandwich. She ate mechanically, one hand on the keyboard, her focus absolute. And slowly, piece by piece, she began to unravel the conspiracy that had tried to bury her. "There," she said finally, around 3 in the afternoon, her voice thick with exhaustion and triumph. "There's the first thread." Marcus and Jalen crowded around the laptop. On the screen was a financial document, numbers and account codes that meant nothing to Marcus, but clearly meant everything to Victoria. "This is a wire transfer from Daniel's personal account to an offshore shell company. 2 days before I disappeared. $5 million. She scrolled down. "And here's another transfer from that same shell company to a security contractor based in Virginia. $3 million. Paid the day after I was taken." "That's the proof?" Jalen asked. "It's a start, but I need more. I need the security footage, the phone records, the emails between Daniel and whoever helped him coordinate this." Her fingers were already moving again, diving deeper into the digital labyrinth. "This is going to take time. Daniel didn't get where he is by being sloppy. He'll have covered his tracks well. I just have to be better at finding them than he was at hiding them." Marcus glanced out the window. The afternoon was fading, shadows stretching long across the clearing. Another night was coming, and with it, another chance for whoever wanted Victoria dead to realize their mistake and come to correct it. "You should rest first," he said. "Even just a few hours. You're running on empty." "I can rest when I'm not being hunted." But even as she said it, he could see her swaying slightly, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. "I just need some more coffee. And maybe—" She didn't finish the sentence. Her eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward, her body finally surrendering to the trauma and exhaustion it had been fighting for 2 days. Marcus caught her before she hit the table. "Is she okay?" Jalen's voice was tight with worry. Marcus checked her pulse, her breathing. Both were steady, if weak. "She's okay. Her body just shut down to force her to rest. Help me get her back to bed." Together they carried her to Marcus's room, laying her gently on the bed. In sleep, With her face relaxed, she looked younger, more vulnerable. The bruises stood out starkly against her pale skin, and Marcus found himself wondering what kind of man could order this done to another human being. What kind of moral calculus lets someone bury a friend alive for money and power? "Dad," Jalen said quietly from the doorway, "are we going to be able to keep her safe?" It was the same question Marcus had been asking himself for the past 24 hours, and he still didn't have a good answer. "I'm going to try," he said, which was honest if not reassuring. "That's what you said about Mom." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Jalen's face immediately crumpled. Horror at what he'd just said written across every feature. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean... Dad, I'm so sorry." Marcus crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled his son into a fierce hug. It's okay. I know." "I miss her," Jalen said, his voice muffled against Marcus's shirt. "And I'm scared. What if the bad people come? What if they hurt you? I can't lose you too, Dad." "You won't." Marcus held his son tighter, made a promise he desperately hoped he could keep. "I swear to you, Jalen, you won't lose me. Whatever happens, I will keep you safe." They stood like that for a long moment, father and son, holding on to each other against the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. Finally, Jalen pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Now, we prepare." Marcus's voice went hard. "If they're coming, I want to be ready." He spent the next hour doing exactly that. Checked his rifle, cleaned his sidearm, inventoried his ammunition. He wasn't a violent man by nature, had seen enough violence in the army to last several lifetimes. But he knew how to fight when fighting was necessary. And protecting his son, protecting Victoria, was necessary. He also set up a perimeter of sorts, little tricks he'd learned overseas. Fishing lines strung between trees that would trigger wind chimes if broken. Motion-activated lights aimed at the driveway. His trail cameras repositioned to cover the approaches to the cabin. It wasn't much, but it might buy them precious seconds if someone came. As darkness fell, Marcus found himself back on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching and waiting. Around midnight, Jalen appeared with 2 cups of coffee, settling onto the porch step beside his father. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only comes from years of shared grief and mutual understanding. "You think she's going to make it?" Jalen asked eventually. "Miss Sterling, I mean." "I don't know. She's tough. Tougher than she looks. But tough only gets you so far when you're up against people with unlimited resources and no conscience. Like we were tough when Mom got sick." Marcus took a slow breath. They rarely talked about Denise's final months, the endless hospital visits, the treatments that promised hope but delivered only more suffering, the slow, terrible waiting for the inevitable. "Yeah," he said quietly, "like that. Except this time, there's actually something we can do." "You mean, besides wait for her to die?" The bitterness in his son's voice was new, sharp-edged, painful. Marcus wanted to tell him that it hadn't been like that they'd fought, that they'd tried everything. But the truth was that Jalen wasn't entirely wrong. In the end, all they could do was wait and watch as cancer consumed the woman they both loved. "I couldn't save your mother," Marcus said. The words came slowly, painfully. "No matter what I did, no matter how hard I fought or how much I prayed or how many doctors I found, I couldn't save her. And that's something I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life." He looked at his son, saw Denise's eyes looking back at him. "But Victoria, she's different. The threat to her is human, It's something I can fight. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm projecting my own need to save someone onto her. But right now, she needs help, and I can give it. So I'm going to. Jalen nodded slowly, processing this. Okay, he said finally. Then we'll help her together. No. Marcus's voice was firm. If things go bad, if people come, I need you to take Victoria and run. There's a trail behind the cabin that leads to the old fire tower. You remember it? Yeah, but no buts. You take her there. You hide. And you don't come back until I come get you. Promise me, Jalen. His son's jaw set in a stubborn line Marcus recognized from 1,000 arguments with Denise. What if you don't come? What if something happens to you, and I'm just supposed to hide and wait and not know if you're alive or dead? Then you wait until morning, and you call the number I'm going to give you. Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracted a worn business card. Derek Chen. He's FBI, but he's clean. He owes me his life from Afghanistan, and he'll move heaven and earth to protect you if I ask him to. Jalen took the card with shaking hands. You're scaring me, Dad. Good. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you alive. I need you to understand that this is serious, that the people who tried to kill Victoria won't hesitate to kill us if we get in their way. Then maybe we should call this Derek guy now. Let him handle it. I considered that. But Victoria's right about one thing. We don't know how deep the corruption goes. Even if Derek is clean, his superiors might not be. The moment we bring in official channels, we lose control of the situation. At least here, on my ground, I can... He stopped mid-sentence. His body went rigid. There, at the edge of his hearing, the sound of an engine, distant, but growing closer. A vehicle on the access road, moving slowly, deliberately, with its headlights off. Inside, Marcus hissed. Now! Jalen scrambled to his feet and through the door. Marcus followed, killing the lights, moving through the cabin by memory and feel. He found Jalen in the hallway outside his bedroom, eyes wide in the darkness. Get Victoria up, Marcus whispered. Be quiet. Get her dressed and ready to move. If I tell you to run, you run. You understand? Jalen nodded and slipped into the bedroom. Marcus moved to the window, peering through the curtain. He couldn't see the vehicle yet, but he could track its progress by sound. By the way the night birds went suddenly silent as it passed. They were good, whoever they were, approaching without lights, probably using night vision. But Marcus was good too. He'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, not by being the toughest or the meanest, but by being smart, by understanding terrain, by knowing how to use every advantage available. And this was his terrain. His phone buzzed softly. A text from his trail camera system. Motion detected. North approach. He pulled up the image. His stomach dropped. 2 vehicles, black SUVs, stopped about half a mile out. 4 men visible, all armed, all moving with military precision toward the cabin. They'd found her. Somehow, some way. They'd found her. Marcus's mind raced through options, scenarios, possible outcomes. 4 armed men against 1 ranger with a hunting rifle and a boy to protect. The math wasn't good. But he had the high ground. He had cover. And he had something they didn't. Everything to lose. Jalen emerged from the bedroom with Victoria leaning heavily on his shoulder. She was awake, but groggy, confusion written across her face. When she saw Marcus's expression, the confusion cleared, replaced by sharp, terrible understanding. They're here, she said, not a question. 4 men, heavily armed, approaching from the north. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach the cabin. Then we run. Her voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "You know this forest better than they do. We can lose them in the dark." "With you barely able to walk? We'd make it maybe a quarter mile before they ram us down." Marcus moved to the gun cabinet, pulling out his .45 and extra magazines. "No, running just gets us all killed. We need a different plan." "What kind of plan?" Jalen's voice was admirably steady, his mother's courage showing through. Marcus looked at his son, at Victoria, at the home he'd built in the years since Denise died. Then he made a decision. "You two are going to hide. There's a root cellar under the kitchen floor, reinforced concrete, hidden under the rug. You're going to get down there, and you're not coming out until I tell you it's safe." "What are you going to do?" Victoria asked. "What I'm trained to do. Defend my home." "Against 4 armed men? That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's our best shot. If I can take out 1 or 2, make them think twice, buy you time to really escape, then it's worth it." He handed the .45 to Victoria. "You know how to use this?" "Point and pull the trigger." "Close enough. Safety's here, 15 rounds. Don't use it unless you absolutely have to." He turned to Jalen. "Show her the cellar. Get inside. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. And if I don't come back—" "You're coming back," Jalen said fiercely. "You promised." "I'll try, son. I swear I'll try." Marcus pulled his boy into a quick, hard hug. "I love you. Never forget that." "I love you too, Dad." Then they were moving, Marcus helping them open the hidden trap door, watching as they climbed down into the darkness below. He closed it behind them, repositioned the rug, scattered the kitchen chairs to make it look undisturbed. From below, he could hear nothing. Good. If he couldn't hear them, neither would anyone else. Marcus moved through the cabin one last time, turning it from a home into a battlefield. He opened windows for better sight lines, arranged furniture for cover, positioned spare ammunition where he could reach it quickly. His hands were steady, his mind clear. This was what training was for, what all those years in uniform had prepared him for. Not the killing, though he'd done that when necessary, but the protection, the willingness to stand between danger and the people who depended on him. He thought of Denise, wondered if she was watching somehow, wondered if she'd understand what he was about to do. She'd never liked his military service, had hated the idea of him in danger, had made him promise when they got married that he'd never volunteer for anything that might get him killed. He'd kept that promise, right up until cancer made it meaningless. What was a bullet compared to losing her inch by inch, day by day, to a disease that no amount of courage or training could fight? At least this was a fight he understood. The motion sensor on his phone chimed again. They were close now, spreading out to surround the cabin. Professional, careful, taking no chances. Marcus moved to his primary position, a spot by the living room window with clear sight lines and good cover. He chambered around, the mechanical sound loud in the quiet cabin, and settled in to wait. His phone lit up one more time, a final text from the camera system. Then he powered it down completely, eliminating any signal that might give away their presence. The cabin fell silent, except for his own breathing, slow, controlled, the way they taught him in sniper training. Through the window, he saw the first shadow detach itself from the tree line, then another. They moved well, covering each other, advancing by bounds, definitely military training. Probably contractors, like Victoria had said. Men who killed for money and called it a job. Marcus's finger found the trigger. His mind went quiet, empty of everything except the immediate tactical situation. 4 targets, unknown weapons, unknown armor. He'd aim for center mass on the first shot, adjust based on results. The goal wasn't to kill them all. That would be impossible. The goal was to make them reconsider, to cost them enough that they'd back off and regroup, buy time for a real escape. The first man reached the porch. Marcus could see him clearly now through the scope. Late 30s, well-built, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. He tried the door handle, found it locked, gestured to his partners. Marcus made a decision. He could wait for them to breach, to come inside where the close quarters would limit their advantages. Or he could take the initiative, strike first, set the tone for the engagement. He chose initiative. The rifle cracked, loud in the night silence. The man on the porch went down with a scream, clutching his leg. Marcus had aimed low, deliberately, wanting to wound rather than kill. A wounded man was a tactical problem for the others, someone who needed help, who would slow them down and eat up resources. Chaos erupted outside. The other three scattered for cover, weapons up, searching for the source of the shot. Marcus was already moving, changing position, using the confusion. He fired twice more. Both shots missing, but forcing the men to keep their heads down, preventing them from organizing a proper assault. Then the return fire started, and Marcus learned exactly what he was up against. Automatic weapons, M4s probably, tearing through the cabin walls like paper. He threw himself flat as rounds punched through the space where he'd been standing, tracking his muzzle flash. These weren't security guards or local cops. These were professionals, and they'd come prepared for serious resistance. Marcus belly-crawled to a new position, his mind cataloging the sounds. 3 shooters, just like he'd thought. The fourth was down or out of the fight. That was something. But 3 automatic weapons against his bolt-action rifle was still a losing equation no matter how he worked the math. A voice called out from the darkness, amplified by a bullhorn. "Marcus Williams, we know you're in there. We know Victoria Sterling is with you. Send her out, and we'll leave. You have our word." Marcus almost laughed. Their word. Like that meant anything to men who buried women alive for money. He said nothing, conserving ammunition, waiting for an opportunity. "We don't want to hurt you or your son," the voice continued. "This isn't about you. This is a private business matter. Send out Miss Sterling and walk away." Still, Marcus remained silent. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Every second they spent talking was a second they weren't attacking, a second closer to dawn and possible help. But they were done talking. The assault came hard and fast. 2 men providing covering fire, while the third rushed the door. Marcus aimed carefully and fired, catching the rushing man in the shoulder. Not a killing shot, but enough to spin him around and send him scrambling back to cover. 2 wounded now. Good. But his ammunition was running low, and they'd learned where he was shooting from. The next burst of automatic fire was concentrated, deliberate, turning his cover into kindling. He rolled away, feeling splinters bite into his face, came up firing. 1 shot, 2, forcing them back again. Then his rifle clicked empty. Marcus dropped it and drew his backup weapon, the old .38 revolver he'd carried as a ranger. 5 shots only. It wouldn't stop body armor, would barely slow them down, but it was all he had left. He could hear them regrouping, probably discussing tactics, deciding how to finish this. From below the floor, there was a sound, so faint he almost missed it. A cough. Victoria. Unable to stop the reflex, giving away their position. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus heard the voice again, closer now, right outside the cabin. "We heard that, Mr. Williams. They're in the house, aren't they? Under the floor, maybe? That's smart. But it doesn't matter. We're coming in, and we're taking Miss Sterling. Anyone who gets in our way dies. Last chance. Walk away. Marcus's hand tightened on the revolver. He thought of Jalen down there in the dark, terrified, depending on his father to protect him. He thought of Victoria, who'd already survived one grave and didn't deserve to die in another. He thought of Denise, and the promise he'd made at her funeral to keep their son safe, no matter what. "No," he said quietly, just loud enough to be heard. "Come and try." The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of quiet that comes right before violence breaks loose. Then the world exploded. They hit the cabin from two sides simultaneously, the door and the back window, a coordinated breach that spoke of extensive training. Marcus fired twice at the door, saw one man stumble back, but the other was already inside, moving with predatory speed. Marcus dove behind the overturned couch as automatic fire tore through the space where he'd been standing. The muzzle flash, bright enough to leave afterimages dancing in his vision. He came up firing. One shot that caught the man in the thigh, below his body armor. The shooter went down hard, but the one from the window was on him now. Marcus felt the stock of a rifle slam into his ribs with enough force to crack bone. He gasped, the pain white-hot and immediate. The revolver tumbled from his grip, a boot connected with his stomach, driving what little air remained from his lungs. Marcus curled around the pain, his combat training screaming at him to fight back, to move, to do something. But his body wasn't responding fast enough. Another kick, this one to his face. He tasted blood, felt his nose break with a sickening crunch. "Stupid," the man standing over him said, his voice flat and professional. "Really stupid. Playing hero." "Where's the woman?" Marcus said nothing. Couldn't have spoken even if he wanted to. Just focused on breathing, on staying conscious. Through his blurred vision, he could see the man who'd come through the door limping toward them, blood streaming down his leg. 2 wounded, but still functional. And somewhere outside, the third was probably covering their exit. "Check the bedroom," the limping man said. His accent was American, Midwest maybe. Ordinary as a hardware store commercial. "I'll make him talk." The other man moved off, and Marcus heard him tearing through the cabin, throwing open doors, overturning furniture. Above Marcus, the limping man crouched down, and Marcus saw his face clearly for the first time. Late 30s, clean-shaven, the kind of face that could belong to anyone. A father, a husband, someone who coached Little League on weekends. Except his eyes were cold, empty of anything resembling empathy. "You're a veteran," the man said conversationally, pressing his rifle barrel against Marcus's broken ribs. The pain was extraordinary. "I can tell. The way you move. The way you set up your defenses. Army?" Marcus spat blood, said nothing. "Army," the man confirmed, as if Marcus had answered. "Me too. 3rd Ranger Battalion, 6 years. Got out when I realized I could make more money in a month as a contractor than in a year working for Uncle Sam." He pressed harder on the rifle. "You understand that, right? It's just business. Nothing personal." "Beating, burying women alive," Marcus managed through his broken nose. "That's your business?" "Sometimes. Usually it's corporate espionage, witness protection breaking, the occasional hostile extraction. This job?" He shrugged. "This was supposed to be simple cleanup. Our employer said the target was contained, that we just needed to verify and sanitize the site. But you had to go and complicate things." The other man returned from his search, shaking his head. "Nothing. Bedroom's empty, bathroom's empty. They're not here." "They're here." The one standing over Marcus pressed harder on his ribs. Marcus couldn't stop the scream that tore from his throat. I heard someone cough. This place isn't that big. They have to be... Wait. His eyes narrowed, scanning the cabin with new purpose. The floor. Check for a hidden space. Marcus's heart seized. Below him, maybe 10 feet away, Jalen and Victoria were pressed into the darkness of the root cellar, listening to every word. If these men found them, if they pulled up that trap door, his son would watch him die before they killed him too. The thought gave Marcus strength he didn't know he had left. He moved fast, grabbing the rifle barrel pressed against his chest and yanking hard. The man above him wasn't expecting it, stumbled forward, off balance. Marcus drove his knee up into the man's groin with every ounce of force he could muster. The man went down with a strangled gasp. Marcus was already rolling, ignoring the screaming agony in his ribs, going for the revolver he'd dropped. His fingers closed around the grip just as the other man brought his weapon to bear. Marcus fired from the ground. No time to aim properly, just point and shoot. The first round missed. The second didn't. Catching the man's center mass, the body armor stopped the bullet from penetrating, but the kinetic force was enough to knock him backward, give Marcus the second he needed. He fired again, this time aiming for the leg. He was rewarded with a scream and the sound of the man hitting the floor. 2 rounds left. One man still down, but not out. Marcus tried to stand, got halfway up before his broken ribs betrayed him and sent him back to his knees, gasping. The man he'd need was recovering, reaching for his rifle, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he was out of time. He'd fought hard, fought smart, but it wasn't enough. He'd failed. Failed Denise by letting her die. Failed Jalen by getting himself killed. Failed Victoria by... The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but it didn't come from Marcus's revolver. The man reaching for his rifle jerked, a red flower blooming on his shoulder, and collapsed. Marcus's head snapped toward the source of the shot and saw Victoria standing by the overturned kitchen rug. The trap door opened behind her. The .45 he'd given her held in a 2-handed grip that was surprisingly steady. "I told you to stay hidden," Marcus said, the words coming out slurred through his broken nose. "You were losing," Victoria replied, already moving to check the man she'd shot. "I wasn't going to let you die protecting me." Behind her, Jalen climbed out of the cellar, his face white, but his jaw set with determination. "Dad, you're bleeding really bad." "I'm fine." Marcus wasn't fine. Was pretty sure he had a concussion to go with the broken ribs and nose, but he forced himself to his feet anyway. "We need to move. There's still one more out there, and reinforcements could be coming." "No reinforcements," the man Victoria had shot said through gritted teeth. He was holding his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. But his voice was steady, professional to the end. This was supposed to be a quick in and out. 4 men, no backup. Our employer wanted deniability. "Daniel Crawford?" Victoria asked, moving closer, but keeping the gun trained on him. "Don't know any names. We get orders through a cutout. Payment in crypto." He laughed, wincing at the pain. "But yeah, the contract was for a woman matching your description, last seen in these woods." He looked at Victoria with something like respect. "You're supposed to be dead. The fact that you're standing here with a gun is going to cause someone a lot of problems." "Good," Victoria said coldly. "Where's your 4th man?" "Outside, probably wondering why we haven't called in success. You've got maybe 2 minutes before he comes to check." The contractor's voice went flat. "And trust me, you don't want to fight him. He's the one they send when the first team fails." Marcus moved to the window, careful to stay out of the sightlines. He could see movement in the tree line, a shadow that didn't quite match the darkness around it. The wounded man was right. They didn't have much time. "Jalen, pack a bag. Food, water, first aid kit, anything we might need for 2 days in the woods. Move fast." Marcus turned to Victoria. "Can you walk? Really walk, not just tough it out?" "I can do whatever I have to do," she said, which wasn't really an answer, but would have to be enough. "Then here's what's going to happen. We're going out the east window, the one they haven't covered. There's a trail about 50 yards into the woods that will take us up to the ridge. From there, we can make it to the old fire tower by dawn if we push hard." "And then what?" Victoria asked. "We can't hide forever." "We don't have to. We just have to hide long enough for you to finish what you started, to get the evidence you need. Then we take it to someone who can actually help us." He pulled out his wallet, extracted Derek Chen's card, handed it to her. "FBI. My friend from the army. If something happens to me, you call him. Tell him Marcus Williams sent you, and he'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Jalen said fiercely, returning with a pack stuffed with supplies. "You promised." "I'm planning to keep that promise, son." Marcus grabbed his emergency pack, the one he kept ready for wilderness rescues, and slung it over his shoulder. Despite the screaming protest from his ribs, "We need to go. Now." They moved to the east window. Marcus helped Victoria through first, then Jalen. He was about to follow when the wounded contractor spoke up. "You should kill us," he said matter-of-factly. "That's what I'd do in your position. 3 witnesses who can identify you, testify about what happened here. Smart play is to put a bullet in each of us and disappear." Marcus looked at him, at the professional killer bleeding on his cabin floor, at the cold calculation in his eyes. "I'm not you," he said quietly. "And I'm not going to become you just because it's convenient." "Then you're going to die. Maybe not today, but soon. Because our employer doesn't accept failure. And you just made yourself a very expensive problem. I'll take my chances." Marcus climbed through the window, dropped to the ground outside, and immediately his legs nearly gave out. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came the full weight of his injuries. Victoria was there instantly, slipping under his arm, supporting his weight. "I've got you," she said, echoing his own words from what felt like a lifetime ago. "The trail's that way," Marcus pointed. "Stay low, stay quiet, and if shooting starts, you run and don't look back. Jalen knows where to go." They moved as fast as they could, which wasn't nearly fast enough. Marcus could hear himself breathing, harsh and ragged. Knew he was slowing them down. 50 yards felt like 50 miles. And when they finally reached the tree line, he had to stop. Had to lean against a trunk and fight the darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. "Dad?" Jalen's voice was small, scared. "Give me a second. Just need a second." Marcus forced himself to focus, to push past the pain. They'd made it maybe 100 yards from the cabin when he heard the shout behind them, the sound of discovery. The 4th man had found his wounded teammates, knew they'd escaped. "Go," Marcus urged. "The trail's right there. Follow it up. I'll catch up." "We're not leaving you," Victoria said firmly. "You don't have a choice. I can barely walk, let alone run, and he's going to be coming fast. You need to—" The muzzle flash lit up the darkness behind them. A tree trunk exploded in splinters inches from Marcus's head. No more time for discussion. Victoria grabbed Jalen's hand and ran, and Marcus forced his battered body to follow. Each step an exercise in agony. The trail was steep, winding up through old-growth forest with a canopy blocked out even the starlight. They climbed in near total darkness, hands reaching out to steady themselves on trees, feet finding purchase by feel more than sight. Behind them, Marcus could hear their pursuer, could track his progress by the beam of his tactical flashlight sweeping through the trees. He was gaining on them. Marcus's lungs were burning, his ribs screaming with every breath. But he pushed on. Ahead, he could hear Jalen and Victoria, their footsteps on the trail. He focused on that sound, used it to pull himself forward. Just keep moving. Just stay alive long enough to get them to safety. That was all that mattered. The trail leveled out briefly, and Marcus risked a glance back. The flashlight beam was closer, maybe 50 yards behind. Too close. At this rate, the man would run them down before they made it halfway to the fire tower. Marcus made a decision he'd been avoiding. The one he'd known was coming since they left the cabin. He stopped running. "Dad!" Jalen's voice carried back through the darkness. "Keep going," Marcus called out. "Don't stop. Don't look back. I'll catch up." "No!" Jalen was running back toward him, Victoria right behind. "Dad, we're not leaving you." "You don't have a choice." Marcus grabbed his son, pulled him close, memorized the feel of him for what might be the last time. "I'm slowing you down, and he's going to catch us if we stay together. So I'm going to give you a head start." "By dying?" Tears were streaming down Jalen's face. "I can't lose you too, Dad. Please don't make me lose you too." "You won't." Marcus forced confidence he didn't feel into his voice. "I'm just going to slow him down, maybe convince him to give up the chase. Then I'll follow your trail and meet you at the tower. I promise." "You can't promise that," Victoria said quietly. "You don't know if you can keep it." "No," Marcus admitted. "But I can promise that I'll try, with everything I have. And I can promise that if I don't do this, we all die right here on this trail." He pressed his revolver into her hand, the last 2 rounds still in the cylinder. "Take care of my son. Please." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw understanding pass between them. The wordless acknowledgement of what he was about to do. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Go." They went, Jalen looking back every few steps until the darkness swallowed them completely. Marcus waited until he couldn't hear their footsteps anymore, then turned to face the approaching light. His body was done, running on fumes and stubbornness. But his mind was clear. He'd bought them maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 if he was smart about it. Time to be smart. He moved off the trail, found a position behind a fallen log that gave him good sightlines and decent cover. The flashlight beam was close now, maybe 20 yards, sweeping back and forth across the trail. Marcus could see the man behind it, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. "I know you're there," the man called out, his voice carrying through the trees. "I can hear your breathing, and I know you're hurt, that you can barely stand. So here's my offer. You tell me where the woman is, and I'll make this quick. You don't, and I take my time. Your choice." Marcus said nothing, conserving his energy, watching the man's approach. He had no weapon, no way to actually stop him. But maybe he didn't need to stop him. Maybe he just needed to buy a few more minutes. "Suit yourself." The man continued forward, and Marcus could see him clearly now. Older than the others, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped caring about most of it. He held his rifle in a ready position, finger on the trigger, scanning for threats. Marcus picked up a rock, hefted it for weight, and threw it off to the left. It cracked against a tree trunk. The man spun toward the sound, rifle coming up. Marcus threw another rock in a different direction, then a third. The man stopped, recognizing the tactic. "Cute," he said, "but I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, soldier. You think you can distract me with rocks? You think—" Marcus's legs gave out then, not from any tactical decision, but from simple physical collapse. He went down hard, and the sound of his fall was like a beacon. The flashlight beam swung around, pinned him where he lay, and the man was moving toward him, rifle raised. "Found you," the man said with satisfaction. "Now, where's—" The shot came from nowhere, a sharp crack that echoed through the forest. The man jerked, his flashlight dropping, and Marcus saw a red stain spreading across his chest. He went down slowly, almost gracefully, and by the time he hit the ground, he wasn't moving anymore. Marcus's head snapped around, searching for the shooter, and saw a figure emerge from the trees. Not Victoria, not Jalen. Someone else. Someone carrying a rifle and moving with military precision. Marcus tried to push himself up, to run or fight or do anything, but his body simply refused to cooperate anymore. The figure approached, and as they got closer, Marcus saw it was a man, early 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of a career military officer. He checked the downed shooter efficiently, confirmed he was dead, then turned his attention to Marcus. "Marcus Williams?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "Derek Chen, FBI." He helped Marcus sit up, started field dressing the worst of his injuries. "Got your text about the break-in. Figured I'd check it out. When those SUVs showed up at your place, I called for backup. They're about 20 minutes out." 20 minutes might be too late," Marcus said. "My son, Victoria. They're heading for the old fire tower. They need—" "Already taken care of. I've got 2 agents moving to intercept. Provide protection." Derek pulled out a radio. "This is Chen. I've got Marcus Williams. Multiple injuries but stable. Requesting immediate medical evac to my position. Also confirming 4 hostile contractors down. 1 deceased, 3 wounded. We're going to need a cleanup team." The radio crackled with acknowledgement. Derek helped Marcus to his feet. "Can you walk?" "Not well, but I can manage." Marcus started up the trail, each step an exercise in willpower. "I need to get to my son. Need to make sure he's okay." "He will be. My people are good." But Derek stayed close, ready to catch Marcus if he fell. "You want to tell me what the hell happened here? How you ended up in the middle of a billion-dollar conspiracy?" So Marcus told him about finding Victoria buried alive, about her story of betrayal, about the attack on his cabin and the desperate escape. Derek listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Daniel Crawford," he said when Marcus finished. "I've been looking at him for years, but carefully. He's got powerful friends, and I needed ironclad evidence before I could move. Sounds like Miss Sterling might be able to provide that. If she's still alive." Marcus pushed himself faster, ignoring the way his vision swam. "If your people got to her in time." They reached the fire tower just as dawn was breaking. Marcus saw 2 figures in FBI windbreakers standing guard, and between them, sitting on the tower steps, were Jalen and Victoria. His son looked up as they approached, and the relief on his face was almost painful to see. "Dad!" Jalen was running, crashing into Marcus with enough force to nearly knock him over. "You're alive! You're alive!" "Told you I'd keep my promise," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around his son despite the agony it caused. "Always keep my promises." Victoria stood more slowly, favoring her own injuries. But there was something different about her expression now, a hardness that hadn't been there before, mixed with gratitude and something that might have been respect. "You bought us enough time," she said. "I got into my company's servers, pulled everything we need. Daniel's communications, the financial transfers, even security footage of him meeting with the contractors. It's all there." "Then it's over," Marcus said. You're safe." "Not yet." Derek approached, showing his badge to Victoria. "We still need to build a prosecutable case, get warrants, coordinate with multiple jurisdictions. That's going to take time. And Crawford is going to know something's wrong when his cleanup team doesn't report back. We need to get all of you somewhere secure. Keep you protected until we can move on him." "How long?" Victoria asked. 48 hours. Maybe 72. Fast as we can make it." Derek pulled out his phone. "I've got a safe house outside Portland. Secure facility with everything you'll need. We'll transport you there. Keep a team on protection detail until this is resolved." Marcus wanted to protest. Wanted to go home to his cabin and his life and pretend none of this had ever happened. But he looked at his son, at the fear still lingering in Jalen's eyes, and knew that going home wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until Daniel Crawford and everyone involved in trying to kill Victoria were behind bars. "Okay," he said, "but I need a hospital first. Pretty sure I'm concussed, and these ribs aren't getting better on their own." "Already arranged. Medical helicopters en route. Should be here in 10 minutes. Derek guided Marcus to sit down. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "You did good work here, Marcus. Saved a life. Stopped some very bad people. Your country thanks you for your service." "I didn't do it for my country," Marcus said, looking at Jalen and Victoria. "I did it because it was right." The helicopter arrived with the sunrise, a thunderous beating of rotors that scattered the morning birds and turned the clearing into a windstorm. Paramedics swarmed Marcus, checking vitals, starting IVs, loading him onto a stretcher. Jalen tried to stay close, but one of the FBI agents gently pulled him back. "We'll follow in the car," Derek assured the boy. "You'll see your dad at the hospital in an hour. He's going to be fine." As they lifted Marcus into the helicopter, he caught one last glimpse of the forest, of the trees where he'd made his stand, where he'd chosen to fight instead of run. Denise would have been terrified, would have begged him to just give Victoria up, to protect their son above all else. But she wasn't here, and the choice had been his to make. He'd made it, and he'd make it again. The morphine the paramedics administered pulled him down into darkness, and Marcus went willingly, knowing that when he woke up, the world would be different. Victoria would have her evidence. Daniel Crawford would face justice. And maybe, just maybe, Marcus Williams could go back to being a simple ranger in a quiet forest. But as consciousness faded, his last thought was that simple was overrated. He'd spent 3 years hiding in these woods, hiding from the pain of Denise's loss, hiding from a world that had taken too much and given too little back. Finding Victoria had forced him back into that world, reminded him that some things were worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. And somewhere in that realization, in that choice to stand and fight, Marcus Williams had found a piece of himself he thought had died with his wife. The part that believed in justice, in protecting the vulnerable, in doing what was right, even when it cost everything. 3 days after the helicopter carried him away from Blackwood Forest, Marcus sat in a Portland safe house, watching the news coverage of Daniel Crawford's arrest play out across every major network. The man who tried to bury Victoria alive was now the one being buried, crushed under an avalanche of evidence that Derek Chen and his team had built into an airtight case. The footage showed Crawford being led from his San Francisco estate in handcuffs, his expensive suit looking out of place against the backdrop of federal agents and police cruisers. His face was composed, almost serene, the expression of a man who still believed his lawyers and his money could save him. Marcus wondered how long that composure would last once he realized the full extent of what Victoria had uncovered. "He looks so normal," Jalen said from his spot on the couch beside Marcus. "Like someone's dad, not like someone who kills people." That's what makes men like him dangerous, Victoria said from where she stood by the window. Her own injuries healing, but still visible in the careful way she moved. They look like everyone else. They smile at charity events and donate to children's hospitals and convince the world they're good people. But underneath, they're capable of things that would give you nightmares. She'd been different since the attack, harder somehow, like something soft inside her had calcified into armor. Marcus understood that transformation, had felt it happen to himself in Afghanistan when he'd seen his first combat. Realized that the world contained horrors that couldn't be reasoned with or wished away. Some innocence, once lost, could never be recovered. The news anchor was listing the charges now, a litany of crimes that would ensure Crawford spent the rest of his life in prison. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, wire fraud, obstruction of justice. The list went on, each charge another nail in the coffin of the empire he'd tried to steal. "They're saying you're a hero," Jalen told his father, gesturing at the television where Marcus's own face had appeared, a file photo from his army days. "That you rescued Miss Sterling and fought off the bad guys single-handedly." "That's not how it happened," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the narrative being woven by reporters who hadn't been there, who hadn't felt the terror, or the pain, or the absolute certainty that they were all going to die. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No." Victoria turned from the window, her expression fierce. "That's not true, and you know it." Most people would have called the police and washed their hands of it. Most people would have prioritized their own safety over a stranger's life. You didn't. You risked everything. And you saved me. Don't diminish that. Marcus looked at her, at the intensity in her eyes, and realized something had shifted between them during those desperate hours in the forest. They'd become connected in a way that went beyond gratitude or circumstance, bound together by the kind of shared trauma that either destroyed people or forged them into something stronger. Derek Chen chose that moment to enter the safe house, carrying a folder thick with documents. He looked tired, but satisfied. The expression of a man who'd spent years chasing corruption and finally caught it. "We got him," Derek said without preamble. "Not just Crawford either. 3 members of your board of directors, Victoria. 2 police officials on his payroll. Even a district attorney who'd been taking bribes for years." He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. "Your evidence led us to more evidence, which led us to more. It's like pulling a thread and watching an entire sweater unravel." "How many people?" Victoria asked quietly. "How many people knew what he was doing and said nothing?" "Dozens, maybe more." Derek sat heavily in an armchair. Some were actively complicit, helping him cover his tracks or providing inside information. Others just looked the other way because it was easier than asking questions. They all share responsibility for what he did to you. The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. Marcus had spent years in a forest where the predators were honest about what they were, where a bear or a mountain lion killed because it was hungry, not because it wanted power or money or control. The human capacity for betrayal, for choosing convenience over conscience, still had the power to shock him. "What happens now?" Jalen asked. "To Miss Sterling, I mean. Does she go back to running her company?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The company I built with my own hands, that bears my name, that I poured 15 years of my life into?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know if I can. Every time I walk into that building, I'll remember that Daniel sat across from me in board meetings while planning my murder. That people I trusted, people I considered friends, were willing to let me die so they could profit from my death." She moved to the window again, staring out at the Portland skyline. Marcus saw her shoulders tense with emotion she was fighting to control. He wanted to say something comforting, wanted to tell her it would get easier. But he knew better. After Denise died, people had told him that time would heal the wound, that eventually he'd be able to remember the good times without drowning in the pain of her loss. 3 years later, he was still waiting for that to be true. "You don't have to decide today," Derek said gently. "Right now, your company is in the hands of an interim CEO appointed by the board. Someone we've thoroughly vetted and cleared. They'll keep things running while you figure out what you want to do next." "What I want," Victoria said slowly, "is to make sure this never happens to anyone else. I want to build something that protects people like me. People who trusted the wrong person and nearly paid for it with their lives." "Like what?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. She turned to face them, and Marcus saw the spark of an idea taking shape behind her eyes. The same spark that had probably driven her from a scholarship kid in Detroit to a billionaire tech CEO. A foundation. Something focused on protecting whistleblowers, exposing corporate corruption, supporting survivors of workplace violence. I could use my resources, my platform, to actually make a difference, instead of just making more money.
"That's a good idea," Derek said. "And it would be a hell of a legacy. Turning your worst experience into something that helps others." "My worst experience," Victoria repeated, testing the words. "Is that what we're calling attempted murder now? A bad experience? Like a delayed flight or a mediocre restaurant?" "I'm sorry," Derek said. "I didn't mean to minimize." "No, I know," Victoria's voice softened. I'm just trying to figure out how to be a person who had this happen to them. How to wake up every morning knowing that someone I trusted wanted me dead. How to trust anyone ever again." Jalen looked at his father, a question in his eyes that Marcus knew he needed to answer. His son had been asking versions of that same question since Denise died, trying to understand how you kept living after the world had proven itself capable of unimaginable cruelty. "You do it one day at a time," Marcus said, speaking to both Victoria and Jalen. "You wake up and maybe you can't breathe for a few minutes because the weight of it all is crushing you. But then you do breathe. You put your feet on the floor. You make coffee. You take one step, then another. And before you know it, you've made it through an entire day. And then you do it again, the next day, and the day after that, until eventually the days start to get a little easier." "Does it really get easier?" Victoria asked. "Or do you just get better at pretending?" Marcus considered lying, offering false comfort, but she deserved honesty. "Both, I think. The wound never fully heals, but you learn to live around it. You find new reasons to keep going, new people to care about, new purposes that make the pain worth carrying." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. They were both survivors of different trauma, both people who'd had their world shattered and were trying to figure out how to build something new from the pieces. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other with that reconstruction. The trial of Daniel Crawford began on a cold morning in late October, 6 months after Marcus had pulled Victoria from her grave. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and Sterling Technologies employees who'd come to see justice served. Marcus sat in the gallery with Jalen on one side and Derek on the other, watching as Victoria took the stand to testify. She was magnificent, calm, articulate, unflinching in her recounting of the attack and everything that followed. When Crawford's lawyers tried to rattle her with aggressive cross-examination, she met them with steel wrapped in silk, never losing her composure, never backing down from the truth. "Miss Sterling," the defense attorney said, his tone dripping with false sympathy, "isn't it true that you'd been under tremendous stress in the months before your disappearance?
that several colleagues had expressed concern about your mental state. My colleagues expressed concern because I was investigating financial irregularities in the company, Victoria replied evenly. Irregularities that, as we now know, were connected to Mr. Crawford's embezzlement scheme. Their concern was actually an attempt to discredit me before I could expose the truth. But you have no proof that Mr. Crawford was involved in any embezzlement, except for the $15 million in unauthorized wire transfers traced back to his personal accounts. The encrypted emails discussing the logistics of my murder. The testimony of 3 contractors who've all identified him as the man who hired them. Victoria's voice didn't waver. Should I continue? Or is that sufficient proof for you? The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge gavelled for silence. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Victoria was going to be fine. Better than fine. She was going to win. The trial lasted 3 weeks. A parade of witnesses and evidence that painted a damning picture of Daniel Crawford's corruption. The contractors testified about being hired to eliminate Victoria. Forensic accountants walked the jury through the complex financial fraud. FBI agents detailed the conspiracy that had allowed Crawford to operate with impunity for years. And when it was Marcus's turn to testify, when he had to relive those terrifying hours in the forest, he spoke his truth, clearly and simply. How he'd found Victoria buried alive. How she'd begged him not to call the police because she feared corruption. How he'd protected her and his son against armed attackers because it was the right thing to do. Mr. Williams, the prosecutor asked on direct examination, what made you decide to risk your life for a woman you'd never met? Marcus thought about that question, about all the complex motivations that had driven his actions. But the answer, when it came, was simple. Because she needed help, he said, and I could provide it. That's all. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Daniel Crawford, who'd built an empire on betrayal and blood, would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. When the verdict was read, Victoria sat perfectly still, not celebrating, not crying, just absorbing the validation of her truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them, shouting questions, demanding statements. Victoria handled it with grace, thanking the prosecutors, the FBI, and most especially, the ranger who saved my life and reminded me that there are still good people in this world. That night, back at the foundation office, after Jalen had gone to bed and the staff had all gone home, Marcus and Victoria found themselves alone for the first time since the trial began. They stood by the windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, the city lights stretching out before them like possibilities made manifest. It's really over, Victoria said quietly. After all these months, all the fear and the fighting and the uncertainty, it's actually over. How do you feel? Marcus asked. She considered the question seriously. Relieved, vindicated, but also empty somehow. I've spent so long focused on bringing Daniel to justice that I'm not sure what to do now that he's been convicted. You build the foundation, Marcus said. You help other people who are going through what you went through. You turn your pain into purpose. Is that what you did after Denise died? The question was gentle, careful. I tried to. Mostly, I just hid for 3 years and pretended I was healing. Marcus turned to face her. But you're giving me a second chance at that. A chance to actually do something meaningful with the pain, instead of just carrying it around. Victoria met his eyes, and Marcus saw something in her gaze that made his breath catch. I couldn't have survived this without you, she said. I need you to know that. Not just the physical rescue, though that too, but everything after. The support, the belief in me, the refusal to let me face this alone. You gave me back something I thought Daniel had taken forever. What's that? The ability to trust someone. She reached out, placed her hand over his heart. Thank you, Marcus Williams, for saving my life in every way a person can be saved. They stood like that for a long moment, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings, possibilities neither was quite ready to voice. Then Victoria stepped back, the moment passing, but not forgotten. We should get some rest, she said. Tomorrow starts the next chapter. Yeah, Marcus agreed, even though sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. Tomorrow. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the way Victoria had looked at him. The warmth in her voice, the gentle touch of her hand over his heart. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the next chapter they were starting wasn't just about the foundation. Maybe it was about something more. Something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. A chance to be whole again. To love and be loved. To prove that survival was just the beginning, not the end. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of promise. And for the first time since Denise's death, Marcus Williams felt ready to meet it. 6 months after Daniel Crawford's conviction, the Sterling Foundation for Recovery and Resilience had helped 43 whistleblowers, exposed 2 major corporate fraud schemes, and become a model for how resources and compassion could combine to protect the vulnerable. Marcus found himself doing work he'd never imagined, coordinating security details, training people to recognize threats, building networks of safe houses and trusted contacts across the country. It was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure, the kind of purpose Denise had always told him he was meant for. But it was the quiet moments that surprised him most. The Saturday mornings when he and Victoria would arrive at the office early, working side by side in companionable silence. Coffee cooling beside their laptops as they reviewed cases. The evenings when she'd join him and Jalen for dinner. The 3 of them falling into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to family. The way she remembered that Jalen loved pepperoni pizza but hated mushrooms. The way she'd ruffle his hair when he made her laugh. The way she'd look at Marcus sometimes with an expression he was afraid to interpret. Dad, are you ever going to ask her out? Jalen's directness cut through Marcus's careful avoidance of the subject. They were making breakfast together on a Saturday morning, a weekend ritual they'd maintained even with all the changes in their lives. Ask who out? Marcus deflected, focusing intently on scrambling eggs. Miss Sterling, Victoria, you know exactly who I mean. Jalen rolled his eyes with the exasperation only a teenager could muster. He'd turned 14 2 months ago, growing taller and more perceptive with each passing day. You like her. She likes you. Everyone can see it except apparently you too. It's complicated, Jalen. She's my boss, technically. And we've been through a traumatic experience together. Sometimes feelings that develop in extreme situations don't translate to real life. That sounds like something you read in a book. Jalen cracked an egg into the bowl. Real life is what's happening right now. And right now, you're happier than you've been since Mom died. Victoria's a big part of that. So what's really stopping you? Marcus set down the spatula, turning to face his son. I loved your mother very much. She was my whole world for a long time. And even though she's gone, starting something with someone else feels like I'm leaving her behind. Like I'm saying she didn't matter enough. Mom mattered, Jalen said firmly. But she's dead, Dad. And I don't think she'd want you to be alone forever, just because you're afraid of being happy again. That's not love. That's just being scared. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 14-year-old boy, nearly broke Marcus's heart. When did you get so smart? He asked, his voice rough with emotion.
I had good parents, Jalen replied simply. Both of them taught me that love isn't something you hoard or protect. It's something you share, even when it's scary, even when you might get hurt. He paused. Mom loved you enough to want you to be happy. I think it would make her sad to see you holding back like this. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Victoria, asking if he and Jalen wanted to join her for a hike in the Cascades. She'd discovered a love of the outdoors since moving to Seattle, often asking Marcus to show her the trails he'd grown to know in the months since they'd left Blackwood Forest. See? Jalen said, reading the message over his father's shoulder. She's asking you on a date and doesn't even know it. You should tell her you'll go, but that I have plans with friends, so it'll just be the two of you. You're diabolical, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I'm helpful. There's a difference. So Marcus found himself that afternoon, driving into the mountains with Victoria beside him, the Seattle skyline shrinking in the rear-view mirror as they climbed toward wilderness. She'd dressed for the occasion, hiking boots and cargo pants, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and Marcus was struck by how different she looked from the polished tech executive who dominated boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals. This version of Victoria was softer somehow, more at peace. I've been thinking about expanding the foundation, she said as they drove, opening satellite offices in other major cities, building a national network of protection for whistleblowers. What do you think? I think it's ambitious, Marcus replied. But so was starting the foundation in the first place, and we made that work. If anyone can pull off something this big, it's you. Not just me. Us. She turned to look at him. I couldn't do any of this without you, Marcus. You know that, right? You're not just an employee or a colleague. You're my partner in every way that matters. The word hung in the air between them. Partner. It was true in a professional sense, but Marcus wondered if Victoria meant something more. If she felt the same pull he'd been fighting for months. They reached the trailhead and started hiking. The path wound through old-growth forest that reminded Marcus of Blackwood, of the morning that had changed everything. I come out here sometimes when I need to think, Victoria said as they walked. It helps me remember what's real, what matters. The office can be overwhelming. All those people depending on us. All those stories of corruption and suffering. But out here, everything's simple. Trees grow. Rivers flow. Life continues regardless of human drama. That's why I became a ranger, Marcus said. After Afghanistan. After seeing what people were capable of doing to each other. I needed to be somewhere the rules made sense, where cause and effect were straightforward. Plant a seed, a tree grows. Take care of the forest, it takes care of you. Is that what you were doing? Taking care of the forest? Or hiding from the world? The question was gentle but direct, and Marcus appreciated her refusal to let him off easy. Both, probably. After Denise died, I told myself I was healing, processing, taking time to grieve. But really, I was just avoiding having to live in a world that didn't include her. They walked in silence for a while, the trail climbing steadily until they reached a clearing with a view that stretched for miles. Victoria stopped, taking in the sight with undisguised awe. It's beautiful, she breathed. I've lived in San Francisco for 15 years and never once took time to appreciate the natural world. Too busy building my company, making money, chasing success. Daniel used to joke that I'd probably work through the apocalypse if it didn't interfere with our quarterly earnings. Do you miss it? Marcus asked. The company? The power? The life you had before? Sometimes, she admitted. I miss the simplicity of it, the clear metrics of success. Revenue, market share, stock price. You always knew where you stood. She paused. But I don't miss the person I was becoming. Victoria Sterling, tech CEO, was starting to lose sight of Victoria Sterling, human being. The woman who grew up poor and scared and determined to make a difference.
Somewhere along the way, making money became more important than making a difference. She turned to face him. And now? Now I remember why I started coding in the first place. Not to get rich, but to solve problems, to protect people, to build things that mattered. The foundation lets me do that in a way Sterling Technologies never did. Her eyes met his. But I couldn't have found my way back to that person without you. You reminded me what courage looks like, what integrity looks like. You showed me that some things are worth risking everything to protect. You did the same for me, Marcus said. You gave me a reason to stop hiding, to start living again, to believe that purpose could exist after loss. They stood there in the clearing, and Marcus felt the moment crystallizing into something significant, something that would define everything that came after. This was the precipice. He could step back, maintain the careful distance they preserved for months, keep their relationship safely professional. Or he could step forward into uncertainty, into the possibility of connection that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Victoria, he started, then stopped, unsure how to articulate what he was feeling. I know, she said softly. I feel it too. This thing between us that we keep pretending isn't there. I don't want to pretend anymore, Marcus admitted. But I also don't want to rush into something and risk what we've built. The foundation matters. Our friendship matters. If we try to be more and it doesn't work, we could also gain everything. Victoria's voice was steady. Marcus, I've spent 6 months watching you be an incredible father, a dedicated professional, and the most genuinely good person I've ever met. I've seen you put everyone else's needs before your own, sacrifice your own happiness to keep your son safe and the foundation running. She stepped closer. And I've fallen in love with you somewhere along the way. The words hit Marcus like a physical force. Victoria, let me finish. She held up a hand. I know you love Denise. I know you still love her in some ways, and I would never ask you to stop. But love isn't a finite resource, Marcus. You have room in your heart for more than one person, and I'm asking you to make room for me. Not to replace Denise, but to stand beside her memory as someone who loves you for who you are right now, scars and all. Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes, emotion overwhelming him. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared of betraying Denise's memory. Scared of losing you if this doesn't work. Scared of being happy, because every time I've been happy, life has found a way to destroy it. I'm scared too, Victoria said. Terrified, actually. The last person I trusted completely tried to bury me alive. My capacity for trust has been shattered in ways I'm still trying to repair. But I trust you, Marcus. I trust you with my life, with my heart, with everything that matters to me. So I'm asking you to trust me back, to take this leap with me, and see where we land. Marcus thought about Denise, about the promises they'd made, about the life they'd planned that cancer had stolen. But he also thought about what Derek had said months ago, about how Denise would want him to be happy, would want him to live fully, love deeply, risk everything for the chance at connection. That was who Denise had been. Someone who embraced life despite its fragility, who loved without reservation, even knowing it might end. Okay, Marcus said, the word coming out rough and uncertain, but honest. Okay, let's do this. Let's see what happens when we stop pretending. Victoria's smile was radiant, transforming her face into something beautiful. Yeah? Yeah. Marcus reached out, took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt. I can't promise it'll be easy. I'm kind of a mess, emotionally speaking. And I come with a 14-year-old son who will probably give you a hard time, just to make sure you're serious." "Jalen's amazing," Victoria said. "And I like that you're a mess. Perfect people are boring. I want someone real. Someone who survived the unsurvivable and kept their humanity intact. That's you, Marcus." They started walking again, hands linked, and something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful distance was gone, replaced by a tentative intimacy that felt both terrifying and right. Marcus kept expecting guilt to crash over him, the sense that he was betraying Denise by moving forward. But it didn't come. Instead, he felt something like peace, the sense that he was finally allowing himself to live again instead of just existing. They told Jalen that evening over dinner, explaining that they were going to try being more than friends, more than colleagues. Marcus watched his son's face carefully, looking for signs of resistance or resentment, but saw only relief and happiness. "Finally," Jalen said, echoing his response from that morning. "I was starting to think you two would dance around this forever." "You're okay with this?" Marcus asked. "With Victoria being part of our lives? Part of our family?" "Dad," Jalen set down his fork, his young face serious. "Mom's been gone for almost 4 years, and I miss her every day. But I also remember what she told me right before she died. She made me promise to take care of you, to make sure you didn't get lost in sadness forever." His voice wavered. "I think she'd be happy that you found someone. Someone who makes you smile the way you used to smile when she was alive." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "When did you grow up so much?" he asked. "Somewhere between losing Mom and almost losing you in that cabin." Jalen shrugged. "Trauma has a way of making you see things clearly." Victoria reached across the table, took Jalen's hand. "I'm not trying to replace your mother," she said gently. "I could never do that, would never want to. But I'd like to be part of your family, someone you can count on, someone who cares about both of you." "You already are," Jalen said simply. "You have been for a while. We just hadn't put words to it yet." The year turned, seasons changing, life moving forward with relentless momentum. They moved into Victoria's house in Magnolia, blending their possessions and their lives into something that felt both strange and right. Jalen painted his room a compromised shade of blue, not quite neon, but definitely bold, and filled it with posters and books and all the detritus of teenage life. Marcus set up his office in what had been a spare bedroom, arranging his files and equipment with military precision. And Victoria transformed the master bedroom into a space that reflected both of them, mixing her modern aesthetic with his preference for warm, lived-in comfort. They navigated the challenges of becoming a blended family with patience and humor. There were disagreements about household rules, about parenting styles, about how much independence a 14-year-old should have. But they talked through each conflict, compromising, adjusting, learning each other's boundaries and triggers. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. And that authenticity felt more valuable than perfection. The foundation continued to grow, its reach expanding as word spread about the work they were doing. Marcus found himself traveling more, training security personnel, consulting on high-risk cases, using his military experience to keep vulnerable people safe. One evening, about 18 months after Marcus had pulled Victoria from her grave, they gathered for dinner at the Magnolia House. It was Jalen's 15th birthday, and Derek Chen had joined them to celebrate, bringing stories from his latest investigation and a basketball signed by Jalen's favorite player. They ate and laughed and told stories, the conversation flowing easily the way it did among people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "You know," Derek said during a lull in the conversation,
I've been thinking about the night I showed up in Blackwood Forest, about how close we came to a completely different outcome. If I'd been 30 minutes later, if those contractors had been slightly better trained,
If Marcus had been slightly less stubborn about protecting you two. He shook his head. The margins were so thin. Life pivoted on such small choices. That's always true, though, Victoria said thoughtfully. Every moment contains infinite possible futures, and we're constantly choosing which one becomes real. Daniel chose betrayal. Marcus chose protection. I chose to trust a stranger instead of giving up and dying in that grave. And those choices led us here, to this table, to this family. Do you ever regret it? Jalen asked suddenly. Not the family part, but everything you went through to get here. The attack, the burial, all the trauma. Was it worth it? Victoria considered the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserved. If someone had told me a year before it happened what was coming, told me I'd be beaten and buried alive by someone I trusted, I would have done anything to prevent it. The trauma was real and terrible, and something I still carry every day. She paused. But if they'd also told me what came after, that surviving it would lead me to Marcus and Jalen, to the foundation and the lives we've saved, to a sense of purpose deeper than anything I'd known before. Her eyes met Marcus's across the table. I think I still would have chosen to go through it. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Marcus said. Some of the most important things in life come wrapped in pain. We don't get to choose the package, only what we do with what's inside. They raised their glasses in a toast. To survival, to choices, to the beautiful complexity of lives rebuilt after destruction. And Marcus felt Denise's presence like a benediction, not sad or jealous, but proud, grateful that he'd finally learned the lesson she'd tried to teach him in her final months. That love wasn't finite or exclusive, that opening your heart to someone new didn't diminish what you'd felt before. That surviving meant more than just breathing. It meant living fully, loving completely, choosing hope over despair, even when hope seemed impossible. After dinner, after Derek had left and Jalen had retreated to his room with his new basketball, Marcus and Victoria stood on the deck overlooking the Sound. Marcus pulled Victoria close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her settle against him with the ease of long familiarity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being buried in my forest. For asking me to help you instead of pushing me away. For giving me a reason to stop hiding and start living again. For loving my son like he's your own. For being patient while I figured out how to love you back." He kissed the top of her head. "For reminding me that survival is just the beginning, not the end." "You did the same for me," Victoria said. "You showed me what real courage looks like, what genuine goodness looks like. You gave me back my faith in people when I'd lost it completely. And you built a family with me, created something beautiful out of shared trauma." She turned in his arms to face him. "We saved each other, Marcus. That's what partners do." "Partners," Marcus repeated, liking the word, the commitment it implied. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because I have no intention of letting you go. You're stuck with me, Marcus Williams, for as long as you'll have me." "How does forever sound?" "Like a good start," Victoria said, and kissed him. They stood there on the deck as night deepened. Two people who'd been through hell and come out the other side. Not just intact, but transformed. Marcus thought about the ranger he'd been, hiding in the forest, nursing his grief like a wound he didn't want to heal. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone he'd been in another lifetime. This version of Marcus Williams was stronger, fuller, more complete. He'd learned that love didn't end with death, that purpose could be found after loss, that some graves were meant to be escaped from. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a message from one of their foundation clients, someone they'd helped escape a dangerous situation. The message was simple, just 2 words, but they carried the weight of a life saved, a future preserved. Thank you. Marcus showed the message to Victoria, and she smiled. That brilliant expression that still had the power to steal his breath. This was why they did it. Why they'd built the foundation. Why they worked 18-hour days and took risks and poured their resources into protecting people most of the world ignored. Because everyone deserved the chance to escape their grave, to survive the unsurvivable, to find love and purpose on the other side of trauma. Later that night, as they lay in the darkness holding each other, Marcus thought about Denise, about the promise he'd made at her grave to keep living, to keep loving, to honor her memory by refusing to let grief consume him. It had taken 3 years, a buried billionaire, and a desperate fight in the darkness. But he'd finally kept that promise. He was living. He was loving. He was whole again in ways he'd thought impossible. And somewhere, he liked to imagine, Denise was smiling, proud that he'd finally found his way out of the forest and into the light. Proud that he'd saved someone who desperately needed saving. Proud that he'd allowed himself to be saved in return. The last thought Marcus had before sleep claimed him was gratitude. Gratitude for the sun sleeping down the hall. Gratitude for the woman in his arms. Gratitude for the work that gave his life meaning. Gratitude for a second chance at happiness when he thought all his chances were used up. And gratitude, strangely enough, for that September morning when he'd heard a voice calling from beneath the earth, when he'd made the choice to dig instead of walk away, when he'd pulled Victoria Sterling from her grave and in doing so had climbed out of his own. Some rescues saved more than one person. Some graves contained not endings, but beginnings. Some whispers in the darkness changed everything that came after. Marcus Williams had learned these truths the hard way, through pain and loss and desperate courage. But he'd learned them. And in learning them, he'd found a life worth living, a love worth keeping, and a purpose worth fighting for. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.